This is the fourth video in a series asking whether people are possessed, and thus far the answer has been yes, yes, and yes. So is Tracy Twyman possessed? And the answer is yes. And as per usual, that's not my claim, that's her claim. When you hear what she has to say about herself, the answer is an emphatic yes. So, thus far we covered Grant Morrison, Jeffrey Kripal, and Genesis P. Orridge. Now, some of you may recognize the name Tracy Twyman, as I'm sure she's appeared on many shows, such as those within what's generally known as the Truth Movement, Patriot Movement, and etc., where she's her research is appreciated because she has done a lot to expose the alchemical nature of the banking system. But then there's this whole other side to Tracy Twyman that gets into bloodletting, Ouija board communication with demons. And so let me take a step back. The basic issue behind the bankers is that there were institutions set up that would basically safeguard people's money. And then they started doing calculations, figuring out that only a minority of people would withdraw their money regularly. And when they did so, of course, they would only withdraw a minimal amount. So they figured that they would, they're sitting on all this money, right? It's not doing anything. So they figured they could lend out the money and charge interest. And that is the ultimate alchemy, is to make something out of nothing. They were taking money for which they did not work, money that was not theirs, money that's just there, they're sitting on it, they're safeguarding it. They're lending out your money, they're charging interest for your money, and they're getting wealthy by doing nothing really, just being middlemen. So that's the basic concept behind banking. And it's kind of fascinating because she condemns that, right? She condemns this form of bankster alchemy. But then she claims that the whole thing was inspired by Baphomet. And Baphomet is one of the beings with whom she's constantly taking marching orders. Again, I'm not saying that, she is, and you'll hear her say that. So it's kind of fascinating that you're taking marching orders from the very same being whom you condemn for setting up this corrupt banking system. And it's even more fascinating to note that biblically, what's generally known as usury is condemned. So within the Bible, this corrupt banking system is just utterly condemned. So now, Tracy Twyman tells this story about getting involved in using the Ouija board, which is kind of interesting because you even have psychics who claim to be in contact with dead people, all right? They're straight up necromancers, and even they'll tell you don't mess with a Ouija board. And I think one of the main reasons is that generally in magical type practices, the two biggest concepts are conjuring and banishing, right? So you conjure an entity, you do your dealings with them, and then you banish them. Well, the Ouija board is basically conjuring without banishing. And of course it's done as a fun game, so it's being done by a person who's utterly inexperienced, doesn't really know anything about it. They're basically putting a neon sign on top of their head that says, "Come in, we're open," to any entity that might be out there somewhere looking for someone to possess. And that, I think, is what it all comes down to from that particular perspective, okay? From their perspective, is that you're conjuring entities and you're not banishing them. So basically, it's a door that's wide open because you never closed it. Now, what many magicians will tell you, and we're talking occult, we're talking real magic, not prestidigitation, not stage magic, not illusion, all right? I mean, I think that my context is pretty clear. They'll tell you that after a certain amount of time of conjuring and banishing an entity, inevitably the entity will say words to the effect of, you think you could just call me and send me away like a common prostitute? And this is when the entity shows that this whole thing about conjuring and banishing was just a game. It was just to get the magician to believe that they have some kind of power over the spirit realm, which they do not have. So that now the entity starts taking over. Now the entity starts laying out the marching orders. And now you are the one basically being conjured by the entity to do its bidding. So she claims that her main contacts in the other world are demons. And then she specifically mentions that she's in contact with Cain and with Baphomet. And basically her goal in life now is to start videotaping her demon conjuring sessions via the Ouija board and put up the videos on YouTube so that just as soon as they tell her what she should be doing, she can spread that message to the world, literally on the World Wide Web. And you too now can get your marching orders from demons. Yes, that's right. Isn't modern technology wonderful? That's her goal in life, to instantly relay messages from demons to anybody who will listen to them through the World Wide Web, the entire planet. It is truly astonishing. And I find that this happens to a lot of people who are not believers. Now I'm talking within the Judeo-Christian context. They get into researching the occult and they inevitably end up involved in the occult. Now, she'll say something like, oh, I hate Aleister Crowley. I hate Anton LaVey. But I've actually used some of their materials. Yeah. So, they kind of fool themselves into saying, yeah, I'm involved in the same exact practices, but they're on the dark side and I'm on the light side. Yeah, so that's okay. They're sorcerers, but I'm a magician. Or they're magicians, but I'm an alchemist. I mean, they throw around all these terms. And it's kind of interesting because they're being manipulated so that the very thing they set out to discredit just turns their happy face to them, and then they like it. So the dark forces don't really care. I mean, it's just like it was stated within one of the Hellraiser movies. Angels to some, demons to other. Okay, these were the Cenobites, the same exact beings saying, we appear as angels to some and demons to others. So the dark side doesn't care. If they want, they'll put on an ugly face, and those who are into the darkness will have an appeal. It'll appeal to them. But if they want, they'll just put on a happy face and, oh, I'm a white witch. I'm an alchemist. I'm a mystic, and that's all good stuff. Yeah, only an ignorant, superstitious person would condemn that. They just obviously don't know what they're talking about. So, with all that being said, here she is in her own words. Oh, and by the way, as an addendum, within this particular interview, she was speaking with Freeman, who basically thinks it's a fantastic idea that she received messages from demons and puts them out for the entire world to access and to basically follow their marching orders. So there's another mystery that, well, it's not mysterious at all, is it? It's just right out in your face. Conjure demons and just relay what they have to say as far as what we should be doing. Because apparently to some people, That's a good idea.
We had this group, we called it Ordo Lapsit Exilis. And we would just put, the logo, which was the Cross of Lorraine at the time, in the magazine. I and some of my other friends had pendants that we would wear with the Cross of Lorraine on them. We would tell people we were members of this organization if they asked, but we didn't do much beyond that. But the order and the Ouija board seances ended up merging and becoming involved in each other. And so the Ordo Lapsit Exilis, I would say, ended up becoming, to a certain extent, a real magical order. We opened it up to broader membership. We had 3 degrees. The other people mainly were like the Rosicrucians do it. We were doing basically mail order initiations for some of the lower degree people. They would take blood oaths on paper. Actually, they would cut themselves in an oath ceremony that we would tell them to do, and bleed onto the paper and send it back to us, and we would have it on our file. All the people who were 2nd degree members had taken the blood oath. Anyway, so we ended up running this order, and it was all associated with the beings that we ended up talking to on the Ouija board, which included Cain and Baphomet. Jean Cocteau only talked to us for a little while, and he wasn't really able to answer our questions very clearly, so he told us to talk to Cain. And after talking to Cain for a while and getting lots of really great information from him, then we got referred to Baphomet, and that's where I would say we got most of the information after that. But I joined this mission somehow that ended up taking over my life. But I really feel like I've been driven this entire time. And I don't know if it's entirely by demons or if there's some hopefully higher power at work. But at any rate, I definitely have been getting messages from beyond about how to conduct my research for this entire time. And so yeah, when I finally actually started talking to them on the Ouija board, and they were talking back, I was getting a clear conversation going. Then yeah, well, it was like I very easily established a rapport with them because I was so deeply involved in the types of ideas that are what they are all about. At least the ones I was talking to, Cain and Baphomet. I mean, the mysteries surrounding them was something I really knew a lot about, and so I knew exactly the right questions to ask. I keep looking at the book, and I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed with this thing that I created.
Nice.
It's definitely the best book I've ever written, I think.
The title, Clock Shavings, can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a quote at the beginning of the book, and I'll just read it to you. It's from God of the Witches by Dr. Margaret Alice Murray, who was an anthropologist in the early 20th century. So she had a book about all the witchcraft craze in Europe, medieval to Renaissance Europe. And so she wrote, "The Swedish witches had a special rite which was obviously intended to impress ignorant minds. They were given a little bag containing a few shavings of a clock to which a stone was tied. They threw this into the water, saying, 'As these shavings of the clock do never return to the clock from which they are taken, so may my soul never return to heaven.'" The alchemical nature of the modern economy, the way it's structured, really, I think, was inspired by Baphomet. And, that goes all the way back to the fact that the Templars invented the credit system. And the Templars, of course, they said in their confessions after they got disbanded by the church and the French monarchy that they got rich because of Baphomet. That's why they worshipped him, because he made them rich. His wisdom made them rich. And I think it was basically he told them how to set up a credit system.
And of course, the Baphomet of the Templars was more a talking head than the goat-headed beast of Eliphas Levi.
Yeah, well, exactly. But there was goats were used in the rituals. I was told specific rituals to do, and we did them. I was told a specific design for the Ouija board to do. And actually, quite a lot of the messages we've received from Cain and Baphomet were about hell. I mean, that's where they are, and they've said as much. So, and they've talked about the apocalypse and end times, and how they're going to be released on Earth, basically, and they think they're going to create some kind of empire on Earth, and then also eventually they think they're going to defeat God somehow. They really think they're going to win somehow. Who actually has a magical ability of its own. It's like a little ritual you do, basically, with the pieces being like little voodoo dolls. And when you move them about and you play the game exactly in the right way, that it has this magical power that you can actually affect reality by playing this game. So that was all kind of interesting. I wish I could use that power somehow to do something. So it seems like the demons, they take some sort of interest in human activities and trying to coordinate them. And I think in general, they're trying to get people doing what I was doing, people who are actually communicating with them, to do their bidding, basically, to make certain events happen on Earth that will, in whatever way, I think magical way, affect reality, to actually open up this gate to let them out of Hades, and then, which may have already happened, apparently.
Right.
It seems like it may have already happened. So yeah, that's what I think is going on. And at this point, actually, I'm kind of part of the reason why I wanted to write this book and get it out there is because I really want to do more of this, actually, and I want to close the gap between me and the public here. I want to be able to put this information out as soon as I get it, to tell people what Cain and Baphomet are telling us these days, because it seems like they could shed a lot of light on current events and also on some of the topics that I'm studying right now. So I'm kind of looking to do this more regularly, and I think I might start putting videos on the YouTube channel that I've got, where I'll tell people right away about seances we've had that had interesting results, and hopefully, if I can get a decent camera, I've got some cameras, but they're not very good. So when I can get the proper equipment, I would like to just be able to videotape the sessions and basically have a YouTube show telling people what we're getting from the demons these days.
Right, that would be fantastic. And the way it's set up now, we could all go live, and you could even, if you wanted to, have a massive live broadcast of your reading.
I hate Aleister Crowley, and I hate Anton LaVey, although I have to reluctantly admit that I ended up, I have throughout my life ended up using some of their stuff, and they're both mentioned in this book. I hate both those guys so much. We were doing all this research. I was finding all these interesting connections. I wanted to find a little bit more. I was getting almost lost in the overwhelming amount of information, and the kind of dizzying, all the connections between things. It was just so much, and I needed some clue for how to approach it. And the idea came up one night. I had just moved in with the guy who became my husband, Brian. And we'd moved to Denver. And so one night we were just talking about how Jean Cocteau, who was one of the guys supposedly Grand Master of the Priory of Zion, he was a French artist and also a poet, and did some films, like avant-garde films. And I had been researching his stuff and finding what seemed like lots of clues that could be interpreted as meaningful. If you believed the idea that he was connected to the Priory of Zion, then you could look at his artwork and find maybe illumination about the mysteries of the Priory of Zion and the Holy Grail and things like that. So anyway, we decided to contact him on the Ouija board, because Jean Cocteau, as it turns out, in his own life, had been very involved in doing seances with a group of other people. One of them actually in the group was Victor Hugo and his wife. So it was like Jean Cocteau and a bunch of these other poets and playwrights and artists getting together to do seances, which they called it table rapping at the time. It worked a little bit differently than Ouija boards. But anyway, they used to do that stuff. And I thought, well, let's try it. Let's see if Jean Cocteau, now that he's dead, see if he'll talk to us the way the ghosts talked to him when he was alive. So we tried it, and it actually worked. It happened a couple of weeks ago even. We're still doing it. Me and my current husband now are doing it. And I really feel like I kind of got tapped into something. I don't know if I asked for it or if it asked me to do it. Over the years of trying to figure out what all these messages meant, what the whole thing that happened, I had to wait years to figure out what it really meant between me and Baphomet. I mean, it started off, we were just getting information. Then specifically Baphomet really wanted to have a role in directing the Ordo Lapse at Exilus and what we were doing. And I ended up just doing all these projects kind of at the behest of Baphomet kind of. And I ended up just feeling kind of worn out and used by it. I wasn't getting the results I wanted. And so I ended up closing the whole thing down, mainly because I started just distrusting what was going on. I felt like I was a slave to this being, and being pushed way too hard, and I didn't know why I was even doing it. I was getting all these other people involved, and I didn't know what I was getting them involved in. And then at the end, I went into this trance one night, and I wrote a book that was supposed to be a manual for the second degree members of the order. And this is the closest I've ever come to automatic writing. I wrote the whole thing in one night, and it really gave me chills when I looked at it later. It's a really scary document in a ways. And I didn't actually finish it entirely. I shared the unfinished document with some of the people I was closest to in the order. But then, like a day or so later, I totally regretted sending that to them. And I asked them, please delete that document. Don't ever look at it again. And I said, I'm shutting down the order. I'm sorry. And as soon as I did that, there were these two people who wrote to me almost at the same time, but they were two people that didn't know each other. They weren't friends. And they wrote to me with almost identical requests to take over the order. They said, please don't shut it down, or if you're going to, then let me run it instead. But they both used very queer language, and I could tell, and almost identical. I could tell they were both being possessed, basically, and forced to do this. That the demon did not want to shut the order down, and was possessing them and trying to get them to stop me.